Hello. A Chinese megastar Fan Bingbing has been fined about 883 million yuan, or about 130 million US dollars for tax evasion. This case has shed light on the murky world of dual yin-yang contracts and caused a shock wave for Chinese celebrities and the entire industry. What are the secrets behind the contracts and extortionate prices in China's film industry? How has Fan Bingbing avoided prison after committing massive tax fraud? And what more needs to be done to improve tax supervision and regulation? To discuss these issues and more, I'm happy to be joined in the studio by Edward Lehman, Managing Director of Lehman, Lee & Xu, Professor Teng Jimeng, regular film critic with CGTN, and He Jian, an attorney at Anjie Law Firm. That's our topic. This is a dialogue. I'm Yang Rui. Before we get started, let's look at this.
Fan Bingbing must pay more than 250 million yuan in taxes and another 33 million yuan in late fees. That's a combined total of around 42 million US dollars. The A-list movie star was also fined an additional 480 million yuan, or around 70 million US dollars. The actress who starred in such Hollywood movies as X-Men, Days of Future Past, had been found to use so-called yin-yang contracts to underreport her earnings. Fan Bingbing's film, Unbreakable Spirit, for example, saw the actress dodging more than $1 million US in taxes. Fan has since posted a letter of apology on Weibo, saying she fully accepts the penalties. "I would be nothing without the party and the country's good policies, as well as the love and support of the people," she said. "I failed my country, which nurtured me. I failed the society, which trusted me. I failed the fans, who liked me." Finally, Fan promised, "I totally accepted all of the penalties and will raise funds to pay my taxes and penalties, regardless of any obstacles."
Well, gentlemen, what do you think of the letter of apology? Do you think she has actually pleaded guilty?
She probably, of course, she acknowledged she had done something wrong, right? Clearly something wrong. There's a big legal liability. I think that's what she is saying. But it's probably definitely short of the criminal liability under the law. You know, the Chinese criminal code has a specific provision when it comes to the tax evasion problem. It's, you know, if there's an administrative penalty, which means that, hey, if you pay the tax in time and all the fines, there's no criminal liability.
But I'm afraid the public opinion is seriously divided as to why she has been released or acquitted, so to speak.
Well, indeed, if you look at the first case, for example, involving that famous actress Liu Xiaoqing years ago, she didn't have to go to prison. And why Fan Bingbing has to go to prison? Why the two contracts now constitutes a problem? For example, the yin-yang contract, the first one is her own personal contract, which is the real value. The second contract is the corporate contract, which is not her contract. And in this case, I think that they need to probe into that very second contract. If it is underreported, well, okay. But then if it is not,
so long as I'm concerned, accountants and those who are involved in this case have been put under investigation.
Sure.
And I believe more investigations will deliver the real story, which is looming larger than the true story that we have seen.
Yeah, you know, ironically, Albert Einstein was the one who said the only thing he thinks was really difficult were taxes when he moved to the United States. And what's happened in China is it's a nascent. Individual income tax is actually a relatively new thing, and how to implement that is a relatively new thing. When we talk about corporate income taxes, for example, versus the individual income tax, which they're trying to make the differentiation, a corporation is a fictitious human being, is a fictitious entity, and as a result, that is separate from an individual income. So you might have Fan Bingbing's alter ego be this corporation, which is facilitating screenplays or doing whatever that might be. That's not really Fan Bingbing, but it's a separate corporation at an arm's length. And so I think it's very difficult for people to understand, I think the general public, that this one person can have a corporation which facilitates a movie, say, or her benefactor or other types of activities, and then her as an individual be a performer in a movie, where she derives an individual income from that. So,
but are you surprised that Fan Bingbing has been released without being charged?
You know, yes, I am. From a public opinion standpoint, and I'll tell you, we have guys like Wesley Snipes, who was an American film actor who spent 3 years in prison. I mean, he was a co-conspirator co-conspirators were convicted up till 10 years. The problem you have with people like Fan Bingbing is that it's so public that she's known by everyone, and as a result, from a legal perspective, it's difficult to say, like I just explained, the corporation is one thing and individuals another. The public just sees that money is being paid to her, and that in some way, shape, or form, and she should be paying individual income taxes, and don't understand the details. And so it becomes very dangerous from a public opinion.
Well, it's more importantly, the public don't understand the fine point of the law. Actually, Chinese law changed. The criminal code changed in 2009. Before 2009, the tax evasion is automatically, the default liability is a criminal liability. Okay, when you register, but after the 2009, the Congress changed the law. So to make this a particular provision to the tax evasion crime, if you pay the old tax and the fine in
What's behind this move of amending the
humanity? For criminal law, people, in the legal world, the humanity doctrine is very crucial. It's not, hey, you should prosecute every crime. If you look at the American law, hey, almost every offense is criminal. Okay, we have a misdemeanor, and it's everywhere. But it does not mean that, hey, the people always, the convicted ones have to always go to jail. You have to be, especially for modern society, you have to design
especially O.J. Simpson.
Well, that's
he was
quite
fined and he almost went bankrupt.
No, that's a jury's decision. And also another thing people got confused about is the Fan Bingbing's personal, the tax liability, and the accountant's issue. The accountant's is now being investigated for criminal liability, not because of tax problem. It's because there's a particular offense which we call the destruction of accounting books. So in China, there's crime related to intentionally destruction.
You mean cooking the books?
The books, change the groups, manipulating the books, destruction of books. So the accountant is investigated for that. But there's a discussion right now that, hey, as a big boss of this company, shouldn't Fan Bingbing be somehow accountable, liable for the destruction of accounting books as well? Okay, maybe Fan Bingbing's problem is not totally over yet, but this moment, the accountant-based investigation is more for destruction of the books.
Now, Jimeng, the legal explanation for the decision is that Fan Bingbing has committed a tax evasion for the first time, therefore she could avoid being imprisoned by paying the fines. The issue that is being raised by netizens in their millions at this moment is, in fact, she has deliberately, obviously, apparently, repeatedly making the same mistakes, if not crimes, of tax evasion. But this is the first time she was discovered and she was fined. And therefore, the issue is whether she should be or should have been put behind the bars.
Well, like I said before, this is a quite complicated issue. The public may be misguided, misinformed, and perhaps she herself is misguided for this very financial misdeed. But one thing I think that stands out quite a bit is this very prevailing corruption among people in the film community. I think it is high time the Chinese tax authorities should highlight the issue and to use Fan Bingbing's tax evasion as a warning shot. I think this warning shot should be fired. Long time ago, to alert the general public and to alert the tax evasion, the tax authorities. I don't think it is fair to place the blame on Fan Bingbing herself alone. I think the tax authorities should also be held responsible for not implementing that very policy or that very law over, since the change that Mr. He has mentioned. I think the tax authorities should implement that very law and make the law known to the very general public, and especially these people who shine so brightly, meaning that they make so much money, tons and tons of money, and without knowing what to do with the money. In fact, it is ignorance, it's legal ignorance on this very case for her.
To a certain extent, also, you've got people in the artistic industry who aren't necessarily maybe they're left brain, right brain type of people. So you've got people that are, the accountants are handling it and are trying to do things, and then the artistic people are doing another thing. I also think that there aren't as many devices or instruments that are available, like trusts and these kind of things that are available in the West, in China, to be able to avoid taxes as opposed to evade taxes. And so I think that this is a large misunderstanding. Even in the West, tax avoidance legal, tax evasion illegal, and what determines those two things can be a very fine line. But avoidance is still highly
And people of your
unpopular.
profession can take advantage of the loopholes and make big money, right?
That's right. Well,
Lawyers.
That's exactly right. That's,
As long as people follow the law.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, but right, accountants and lawyers. I mean, lawyers have a fiduciary duty, and they have also a right to privacy as long as they're not trying to commit fraud.
I think public opinion probably more reflected a sense of justice or sense of fairness. That's not really about the law, right? And then. That's why.
And do you think Fan Bingbing has been brought to justice on this issue of tax evasion?
Well, it really depends on in what sense, right? You talk about the criminal code, criminal liability, the law is pretty clear. The law doesn't even say it for the first time, right? The law gives a really fine treatment of this kind of problem. The law really gives the fine problem. Now, from a public point of view, we totally understand it. People say, hey, some super rich, they don't even pay the right amount of tax. That's why there's so much anger. Now, looking at the Americans, right? When people realize, hey, like a big corporation like Apple pays so little tax, they use it, I think, the Ireland for the tax treatment. And now they also got a big controversy. But if you look at the law, what they do probably not really violation of any laws.
Yeah, they have things called the double Irish. They have things called the Dutch sandwich. All these kind of tax avoidance plans. They were all uncovered in the Paradise Papers and the Panama Papers, which talked about tax havens and this types of things. And these corporations are utilizing them. In some instances, General Electric was an example that didn't pay any federal income tax, or in Apple in Europe, in Ireland, and those kinds of things. So this is all tax avoidance. This actually gets everyone worked up and excited. But the devil or God is in the details with regards to the tax codes and law. Is Fan Bingbing, is she brought to justice? I mean, technically she is, but in the court of public opinion, and it might change the law. They might not allow it. I think that the thought process is this is not a violent crime, and if you pay back the money plus the penalty, and I think the majority of it was penalty, I believe, and so if you're paying back the money and the penalty, then you really haven't committed a crime and you're publicly humiliated. Maybe that's
Timo, do you think justice has been done in this sense, that all of those working for the show industry could regard this case as a wake-up call?
I think so.
They cannot afford to evade the taxes any longer. I mean, supervision would be strengthened seriously.
Well, absolutely, absolutely. I think if you read carefully Fan Bingbing's letter of this apology, and you will see it was very carefully. What happened
to the yin-yang contract?
Yeah, I mean, at least that very yin-yang contract will be gone. I mean, right now, I mean, as I talked to an industry insiders this afternoon, I mean, all film companies are now living in what Fan Bingbing wrote in that very letter, fear and worries. And the idea is that this very case highlights this very issue of yin-yang or double or redacted contracts. In this case, I think film companies will use it as a lesson for the future. So when they sign, for example, sign up a actress or actor, I mean, the first thing that we'll need to do is to make sure that the lawyer will be on site. The lawyer will be on site to sign the contract and sign one contract only instead of two contracts. So yin and yang already, I mean, is seen as something as a financial misdeed among the people.
But the other thing is also to take into account is that these movies are now international. And the United States and Eritrea, of all places, are the only places that have worldwide income for individual income tax. We have a tax deduction of $108,000. So, I mean, if you make that in a foreign country, that's a deduction. And so what you don't have in China is if these are international, so part of the roll is in Malaysia, part of the roll is in China. Derivative of the income is coming worldwide, and some of it's coming from different parts of the world. And so as a result, I think it's actually much more difficult because it's less developed in China on international taxes. You don't have to pay if the money is accrued abroad, generally speaking.
And what about the latest decision by the State Administration of Taxation, which demands that all of the incomes of actors and actors of a single movie would only account for 40% of the total budget. That has set the ceiling for the incomes. Now, previously, incomes of the Chinese megastars in the film industry must be the envy of their counterparts in South Korea. they are not paid half as good as the Chinese movie stars.
Right.
What do you think of
Right.
the sharp contrast?
Well, that policy, you know, back to first thing first, I think that very policy was a very, very positive move made by the Chinese film authorities and also the film associations. In fact, that very policy is based on a decision or a guideline made by the Alliance of Chinese Film, Television, and others. I mean, basically, this is an industry guideline, I mean, guiding and regulating the very income on the part of the film performing artist. And so in this case, there are two cappings. The first capping is that, all these big actors, their fees must be capped by 40%, not exceeding 40%. Mm-hmm. And the second capping is that any one actor involved in this very project, their fees may not exceed 40% of 70% of the casting budget. In that case, I think that positive future, bright future will be, out there in sight. In terms of fairness and justice. Like you said, you mentioned that our South Korean counterparts, their fees are extremely, low compared to their Chinese.
And therefore, do you think, do you guys believe that the golden days of the Chinese movie industry are over? Given the harsh and draconian policy restrictions.
I wouldn't say, well, it's all depends on the content, right? I think for the last few years, we're actually complaining that, hey, the Chinese movie, we'll hope that the Chinese movie can come up better, right, in terms of content. We probably have some shiny movies, but hey, it's not, probably the quality is not as good as we are hoping for. Money is never a deciding factor. So, but I just saw some reports that some younger sort of actor or actress now giving more opportunities because their demanding salary is much lower, right, than the A line, the actor or actress.
Small budget movies like The Crazy Stone could create a huge box office miracle.
Yeah, or like the Ashes is Pure as White that we saw quite recently. Hosted by Mr. He Jing. It was a great film, and it was a small budget film. It was not the hundreds and millions.
It's a really great story.
And it's a great story out there, right? And so in this sense, content is the king.
And what can we learn from Hollywood?
Hollywood's taken a big arc. So in the so-called golden age of Hollywood, when it all was beginning, the studios were driven. So you're actually working for a studio, you're actually drawing down a paycheck. Then that was disbanded, and that was said to be monopolistic in some way, shape, or form, or oligopolistic, I guess, when a number of people were holding people's contracts. And so then they had the same kind of issue that we have now with Fan Bingbing, where people are getting paid independently. Then they would create their own sort of mini studios. So I see it sort of as an evolution. I think that this is just part of it. I think that the entertainment industry, as was just discussed here, is changing so dramatically, not only with the big screen, but also in all sorts of outlets, that money can be derived in every
But I think arguably, public ceiling can also be easily get around. I can imagine there's a big actors, big stars, they may be demand to be the producers, or maybe the shareholder of the home company that owning the movie. So
digital technology-wise, there's no doubt that the Chinese film industry is catching up very quickly in terms of how to get close to the standards of Hollywood. However, maybe we're barking at the wrong tree. Why don't we learn more from IRS in the United States? Because that's so powerful. It will help, stem all kinds of possible tax evasion, and the fines and the punishment will be the most serious, severe in the world.
Well, it's arguable that, the United States came out of a tax dispute.
Right.
So, it's the Boston Tea Party was against
the
tariffs.
income tax.
Exactly, right.
Income tax.
Income taxes started in 1861, technically just to help to support the Civil War effort. Then it was the 16th Amendment that came along in 1909.
Is it rectified by all the states?
Yeah,
sure?
I must have been, I guess. But in 1909, but in 1913 is when they really started.
But there's a new film, actually. This is a documentary film about that very controversy.
Oh, is that right? Okay.
Not all states rectified that very...
well, no, that's the debate. And that's
that's the debate, right?
That Wesley Snipes, he's called an 861, which is, this is specifically what they're talking about. These are protesters. They say, we're not part of the United States. We're actually defecting. And he did that in a public way.
Wow.
And the United States actually couldn't, the IRS couldn't handle that kind of a public protest from a movie actor, which I don't think Fan Bingbing has done. But what we do in the United States is it's voluntary. So 40% of the income comes from individual income tax. 40% comes from payroll taxes.
Right.
So that's taken out of your paycheck. So the average worker is actually having that taken out of their income that is working at a lower wage job. And so that's where like 80% of this income tax comes from. But those are all independent declarations that you make, but they advertise it as the date is April 15. I'm not sure what the date
But
is
I
here
think
in
the
China.
share of the Chinese personal income tax is never a major source of income for the government.
No, it
So,
hasn't been.
Yeah,
It's
it's
been
not.
it's been
Actually
tobacco
very
is the
small,
actual
actually.
number. Yeah.
So actually the tax base, I mean the people, the number of people who are really paying a lot of income tax, not that very high. You know, I just received a short message this morning, I think from China Mobile, through actually indirectly from the state taxation administration. It's basically informing to say, hey, it's a friendly reminder from October 1st. The deductible income tax, the basis starting from 5,000 RMB.
Right,
so
right.
it's a
I got that
increase,
message.
right?
Right, I got
so
that
we
message.
saw that. I think the tax authority trying to be friendly. So the net effect that there are not that many people paying a lot of personal income tax in China these days. Chinese government, I mean, our finance system is structured in a way that, hey, the government get a lot of taxes like from the industry, through the
corporations.
sales, from corporations,
Well, number one
from
is
land,
actually
right?
tobacco monopoly. Actually, is
yeah.
the largest taxpayer in China.
Right.
So it
And-
doesn't really worth it. It's
Excellent.
not worth it for the government to spend a huge amount of resources to build a very powerful taxation authority like RS or like a
IRS.
German tax
No, but I
authority.
see that they're going to shift
No,
though because they
we
have
are
to.
actually discussing the issue of justice, the huge income discrepancy and income redistribution.
Right.
But unfortunately, tax is not the best way to deal with it.
But tax can be used for the public good, right?
Yeah, of
IRS
course, of
collect the
course.
taxes and they use for public causes, setting up schools, hospitals, upgrade the roads. But this country, I mean, to a large extent, is very controversial. I mean, for our income, for example,
No,
it's
for
very
years.
small income.
I know, but still, now think about it.
Still
China, for
tax.
years, talking about the property tax.
Mm-hmm.
You know, looking at the major
Right,
source
right.
of asset of the Chinese people these days are the apartments, but no property tax.
Right.
Right.
And look at the
Rejected-
U.S. That's one
reject-
major part of the tax revenue, but we're not dealing with that.
Well, it's been rejected.
Now,
by-
if you want to say, hey, we want to make sure everybody pay their tax, look, think about the policy implication, right? Even for this Fan Bingbing case, that's already driving away lots of well-doers, very successful people in this industry. I'm not talking about the sense of justice, okay? But you have to looking at the big picture. It's
But
a
the other
more
thing is-
complicated issue you have to look into.
even with
Are you suggesting quietly that the lenient policy that has been practiced in the case of Fan Bingbing actually aims to encourage or show up the confidence of consumers and investors and particularly those in the film industry so that they would not
Well, I'm not saying that, but one
immigrate,
thing-
they would not escape
Well,
from
why don't
China.
say that? Why don't you say that? At one point, I mean, in Liu Xiaoqing's case, 3 lawyers said, we want to defend her because we want to protect this very seed for future tax. So this is called shuizhong. I mean, they were talking about we save her, save the company, and save the future tax.
That's probably why
money
the
for
law
her.
was changed
Right,
in
right.
2009.
So why don't we
Right
save
before that
Fan
case.
Bingbing's company? Now Fan Bingbing's company is totally erased.
Well, He Ji, I'm a little bit shocked when you were saying taxes should not be used to ensure social justice. What are you talking about?
No, it's
when-
not the only way.
It's not the
in
only way,
China,
but
now
is
even-
it the
well,
most important
Why don't
way?
we talk about the property tax? There's a personal income tax, one type of tax. That's my point.
But also with social
Perhaps
justice and tax, the one thing I
even
wanna-
more embarrassing issue is the awareness of taxpayers.
Yeah,
We do have the awareness of paying taxes, but what about the awareness of taxpayers? What can we get in return as a taxpayer?
But I mean, but that specifically, I think what might be the idea here is if you look at it as social justice, okay, so that you're saying that the guys who have the most money should all, let's say you're all going out, all of us are going out to dinner, and because I might make the most money, I'm always going to pay the dinner bill.
Yeah.
You guys are exempt from paying every single time. So this idea of social justice, that the guys who have the most money should pay it all, it should be this idea that perhaps everyone should pay part of the taxes and to contribute to the society and say, I am actually a taxpayer in this society and I'm actually contributing to the betterment and patriotism of this country by paying my fair share of the taxes, whether it's small or large. But to make the rich people pay every single time is the argument we have in the United States all the time about whether that's fair or not fair. Should we redistribute, or should we just print more money? I mean,
that's always a popular.
Right.
That's always a popular position.
Right.
Now, look at the one thing we have not talked about it. In China, it's actually probably for many Americans, it's crazy to realize in China, it has been always a practice that the local government has a huge amount of power to give tax incentives. For this particular case, actually, the local governments actually give particular tax, the benefits for the entertainment industry. That's why lots of the big stars are setting up the studios in some local governments to get out of the
such
tax
as in Wuxi, a major city of Jiangsu province.
But now, after this case has now been changed, I think China, the National People's Congress, now talking about amendments of taxation law. So make sure only the central governments, the National People's Congress, the central government has a power to change the tax. No local governments are allowed to give particular tax benefits.
I think that the Wuxi government sometimes tend to fail to carry out their duty to levy tax on these corporations and individuals. Now, in Fan Bingbing's case, her company is registered in Jiangsu province, right? And so in this sense, it's the tax authority in that very province who should implement strictly that very law, and so that they can avoid such scandal like this. Now, if we want to create a favorable situation for film industry, why not do as a Xinjiang autonomous region? I mean, there is a small city out there.
Look, gentlemen, I have a serious concern about the future of a local revenue, a local fiscal income, given the huge local debts. Now, the land revenue has to be put to an end. The boom of land revenue is over. Now, when the central authorities vow to take back the rights of local taxation policies, then I'm afraid that will cast even more shadow on the prospects of local fiscal growth.
No, property taxes is on the rise. That's something inevitable.
It's
property
inevitable.
Tax, yes.
But then it will be counterproductive, I'm afraid. It won't be a strong incentive, will it? For the local industrial growth.
On real estate taxes, the way it works in the United States is essentially you're paying for the schooling, local schooling, you're paying for the local fire, local police, and so that's where the fees go to specifically. So we have municipal taxes, state taxes. So like if you're in New York City, for example, I mean, you could pay as high as 55% of your income into taxes, state taxes, federal taxes, city taxes, and even borough taxes on top of it. So it really depends. And so with Wuxi, it seems that there's a central government taxation, but there's also some exemptions. And the question is who can give them and who can't. And like I said, I think it's all just sort of starting right now in the last really 5-6 years.
Okay, the last question goes to Jimeng. When we discuss the high salaries of actors and singers, there is a concept often mentioned, fan economy. 粉丝经济, right, in Chinese. Fanatic followers are willing to spend the money regardless of the quality of the performances. And this seems to be a more serious problem in East Asian countries than other parts of the world. What do you think of this?
Well, what do you mean by serious problem? I think fan economy is worldwide. I mean, in South Korea, in the United States. But fan economy, yes, I mean, like you said, it's, I think it's a very special phenomenon. I mean, with this large fan base, you created the profit. I mean, profit sometimes even comes from this fan base. For example, fun is a huge...
But at the cost of the quality. The quality of the product, quality of the movies, and other presentations.
It is entertainment. It is entertainment. It's a consumption.
You mean entertainment businesses are cheap?
A race to the bottom. I mean, look at the Kardashians.
The fans are willing to
Thank you
pay.
so much.
It could be.
With that, we come to the end of this edition of a dialogue talking about Fan Bingbing's case and what's going to happen to the future of the shoe business in China. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.